Hey, this is Vu, and today I'm going to take an advanced look at DE Dust 2, things you can do, things your team can do, and ways you can win rounds on this map. So to begin with, the obvious play is for long control. If you have a long spawn and you haven't already lost a couple of rounds going for long control, you probably want to be going for it because it's simply too easy to win rounds as a T with control of long, and obviously as a CT, knowing that, you probably want to be contesting it as much as possible. Although it's possible to win on this map without ever going for long control, you're never going to find the level of consistency you will have if you can get control of long. Now, one of the most popular ways of getting control of long relies on a corner smoke, and the easiest way for me to throw this is to get over here, aim up from the middle of the doors to the top of the roof, and that's going to smoke off corner. The reason this smoke is really effective is it forces CTs to swing wide if they want to be contesting, which makes them more susceptible to flashbangs, and also means that they're not really safe if they want to take a few shots and fall back. They really have to be committing around that smoke, and that means that if you are hard pressuring long and your T side wins it, they're not going to be able to fall back effectively. You're probably going to get an extra couple of kills. It also gives a little bit of cover for someone to jump into pit, as that prevents this opper on platform from really seeing you jump in, and that's the most dangerous aspect of getting into pit if you get long control. But the tough part is the long control, and oftentimes when it comes to controlling long, it really feels like it's a bit of a build order win sometimes. One of the most popular ways to try and take long recently relies on this smoke towards the corner again, plus you have a player that dodges flashes, comes around, and then spins back and goes wide very quickly right above pit. Now this is a hyper aggressive route that works extremely well against teams that are trying to do things like double mollying deep long, where you molly towards doors and you have a player that tosses a molly off the wall towards blue bin as well. That's a really effective play as a CT if your opponents are playing a more passive take of long. However, this hyper aggressive play is going to catch you off guard and catch people with nades in their hand a high percentage of the time. That means, again, sometimes this is just a straight up build order win, but what you want to be doing is making sure you're very quick to adjust the way you're taking long if this type of thing is happening. If you're going hyper aggressive and they're throwing a molly like this, which is completely useless against the more passive takes of long, then you can switch it up and you can try and take it a little bit differently. But the idea is sometimes long is just not possible to be taken or held with the way you take it or hold it, and you're going to need to give it up. When you do that, that's where Dust 2 gets a little bit more interesting. Long control is kind of the least interesting part of the map, in my opinion. Now, the most obvious thing to do as a T side if you can't get control of long is start focusing on the fast cat. Especially if your opper has been hitting them on the cross, they're going to be smoking the cross consistently, and if they're smoking the cross consistently, there's no real way for them to deal with this fast cat. Even if they can spot it out, even if they cross in front of that smoke and really see you getting down towards bottom middle, there's not much they can do to stop it. And if they don't notice it, running directly out middle is extremely strong. You can even catch players that are trying to hard commit to long early, rotating back towards car or rotating back towards middle. And if nobody is in these angles, you can just swing out on their B players and catch them completely off guard. Of course, if there's no CT spawn smoke, they're not really expecting someone outside of B, but you didn't really have too much risk here. You know, you came over here knowing that you're here so early that if they're hard contesting long, you're probably going to catch them off guard. And once you saw that this was clear, you just strafed right past the angle. There is a second or two where you're in danger there. However, the risk reward is off the charts, as the reward is almost essentially a free round one. That means the CT side really needs to be spotting towards this mid push as consistently as possible, and if necessary, having a player walk in front of the smoke just to spot this player if they're going for the fast cat. And if you do get spotted on this fast cat, you don't need to run out middle into them. You can even just make your way quickly up catwalk and hold cat control early. Although cat control isn't quite as effective as long, you can do some executes off of catwalk as well. Something like the lurk smoke down, plus you toss the smoke that a Vanguard likes to throw that lands right about here. Call it the Vanguard smoke or the lurk smoke that gets you all the way out around towards elbow before the Opper can really deal with you. And that just eats up a lot of space that this Opper wants to be taking. If this Opper can't hold up here, he's got to hold back here. It means he's getting 1 to 3 less op shots off as you're going for that exec. But instead of executing, you don't necessarily need to do that either. You can very easily just fall your way back. You can very easily make your way back towards long a little bit late, or just throw a bit of a fake towards middle, or go out mid to B. Still, the classic mid B take is one of the most effective things on the map, especially when you have, mollies that can be landing on right side of doors off of a default as well. Now, Dust 2 is a map where you certainly can be running defaults, but a lot of the gimmick plays are what certainly work out. Now, one thing to mention, if we harken back towards long control and think about cat control off of that, the reason long control is so effective is because cat is an angle that you can't actually really hold on to. When it comes to cat control on Dust 2, it's more of a gimmick than a spot that you can actually hold. If the T side knows the CTs are going for cat control, some effective nades utility usage can really push them off of everything. Some easy flashes, plus a molly towards the Opper angle like that, that'll push this Opper back off the corner here, is going to get a whole lot done and really should force the CTs off. Now, if you have long control and you get cat control off of them, the round is essentially over. So if you are on the CT side, one of the things I see that really not enough people understand is that you don't hold back here. If you're going for cat control, be aggressive and force onto the Ts in middle. Very often Ts are kind of sitting down here looking towards mid doors. They might be lining up a flash. They might just be kind of chilling in lower. They're not really thinking about the CT aggression up this deep. And while it is a bit risky, if you can do something like have a CT from middle, toss a flash like that and help support your lower while you swing out off top cat, this is how you catch Ts, and this is how you make cat control work. You don't allow the Ts to come to you. You don't allow them to dictate the pace on a spot where it's really just a gimmick and you certainly can't hold on to it effectively with consistency. You take the fight to them, you control middle, and if they have long control, and you clear out middle, you've got a ton of information on your hands. One of the worst things about the enemy having long control is the lack of information. All you can really do is have an Opper hold from an angle like this. He'll often get pushed off of this angle back to an angle like this, and this is not nearly enough info because the Ts can be 4-man walking up, toss down a couple smokes, toss a flash high, and immediately cross and just be on site instantly. But they could also be 4-man walking back into B tunnels as well. That lack of information is part of the struggle. And this take in middle, just getting aggressive with flashes, just getting aggressive perhaps with an Opper walking up sometimes as well. This is the type of thing that can bring you back into rounds where you're at a major disadvantage to begin with. But I often see people think, when they lose long, they just go back and hold cat passively. Well, that is a way to do it. While that is something you will often need to do, if you can help it, if you have a double up on cat later on in the round, just go for that information in middle, catch your opponents with their pants down, and find the round win. Now, if we're talking about defaults, on the CT side, of course, you're looking at something like a 3-1-1. You might even want to send 4 players towards long A early if you're looking for, the long contest and your opponents are doing it often. Sometimes this does become, as a map, a little bit of a gamble. Do you go 4 long this round? Do they have a long spawn or not? I really do wish they would bring back rotation spawns where, every 4 rounds you'd have the same spawn instead of this random spawn stuff where it does feel a little bit gambly. Do they get a long spawn this round or not? However, in general, you're going for a 3-1-1, and a lot of the time you're looking to get your Opper some picks, especially if you've already secured that your opponents are not going to be going for long control consistently. You can get picks with an op on Dust 2 in so many random angles, and they're tough to deal with. Stuff like boosting up on catwalk here to see into lower, Peeking out towards Xbox as well, or even peeking out from cat towards top middle can be incredibly effective. Something that very few people seem to understand, at least outside of league play as well, is this type of play pushing up into tunnels and just walking in. You're well aware that usually the T's are going to be sending only one player soloing upper tunnels, sometimes not even that on certain rounds if they're doing some sort of set play, and if he's there, you can almost assuredly get a trade. You know, you have an opper walk up, peek this angle like this, rifler on the inside. If the opper misses his shot or if the opper dies, it's a quick swing for a quick trade. And even if you go into the 4v4, you're at least giving yourself a pretty big portion of the map that has now been denied any information, and the T's will have to try and retake if they want to go that direction. So certainly something to keep in mind, running that opper around for picks all over the place off the back of a 3-1-1. Now with the 3-1-1, I will mention there's a couple of ways to try and contest long. I believe I mentioned the molly towards the blue bin like that, plus the molly in long. Just make sure when you throw that molly, you're throwing it unpeaking, and then you can play anti-flash for a second. You can also throw a flash like this that bounces off of these two corners and bounces out in a rough spot, in a pinch. If your teammates aren't flashing for you, that's a flash that can be pretty effective as well. I believe you can also throw it without even moving. It just won't land quite as deep and thereby won't catch someone that's hugging this wall if that ever is to happen, which I have actually seen happen before. But you can throw a flash like that if you need. You can also do something kind of clever like smoking off there when your opponents are smoking off the corner. And that smoke will allow someone to cross directly into pit. And although it puts you in a bit of an awkward spot, it's not the easiest place to play out from. It does give you a way to contest long, especially if your long control standard isn't going all that well. But similar to T-side, sometimes there are simply build order victories, and sometimes you're simply going to have to give up long, at least for a few rounds in a row, and perhaps you go back and contest a little bit later once they get a bit complacent. But if you do have to give it up, usually the response is a double boost up onto catwalk, and then you do what I was saying earlier. Either you're boosting to pick into lower and try and get a frag, or you're doing something like getting aggressive and contesting in middle when you know they're down there and you know that they're not really ready for it. On the T side, a default can look like a few different things. One of the most common smokes you're going to be looking to throw on the default is like this. It's between these two angles here. That's going to be an Xbox smoke for you. And you're usually looking at having an opper here towards T spawn. And you either have, 3 in tunnels or 2 in tunnels and 2 coming around the long way to top mid early. The reason 3 in tunnels works well is if that opper T-spawn ever gets a pick, these 3 can force their way into B very quickly, and in a 3-on-1, if your opponents are playing a 3-1-1, it will occasionally gift you a free round win, whereas with 2 players in tunnels, do you go for it? A lot of the time the answer is no, because it's not a guaranteed victory, especially because it's so kind of transparent. You gotta pick in middle. There's a very good chance you're going to be rushing B. This does set you up if you go 3 tunnels for a boost up to clear out catwalk, to clear that out. Then you can come through lower and throw the Xbox smoke yourself instead of having someone throw it from spawn, and you're in a decent spot to go for cat control. Or you can run 2 in tunnels and 2 towards, this player here. One of them probably holds that long A control while the other comes over here and can toss a flash for that lower player to get out safely. That flash should blind, any opper boosting up, any opper towards Xbox, anything like that. And then you're going to go for cat control very similarly to what you would do if you had long control already, with just a little bit less expectation that your opponents are for sure going to be holding it. Flash like that works very effectively. Molotov like this works very effectively. And in a tight spot, you can even throw a flash for yourself if you really need, that will land and hang directly in front of your opponents. And because that hangs for so long, your opponents are going to see it, turn back around, and likely you can get a kill. The one thing to note is if your opponents are definitely playing on cat, usually what you want to do is something like this. You throw a double flash in towards catwalk, because almost universally one player will be playing anti-flash while another is holding. So if you throw one flash initially, the second flash will catch the player that turns back around, and both of them will be blind at the same time for you to swing out and grab a couple of free kills. from there, there's a lot of things you can do. One of the most obvious things is the full cat exec that people are really starting to like, especially since the Avangar smoke has become popular. You call it the Avangar smoke or the lurk smoke. I believe this is actually the usual lurk smoke. This is like the second lurk smoke or the Avangar smoke. And this gives you free reign up past elbow here. And what that really means is that the Opper that is oh so dangerous over here towards Game Helper, instead of being able to pick you once here, back up, shoot once here, shoot once here, you know, he's got 4 or 5 shots as you're making your way onto the bomb site. Rather than that, he's now lost his initial 2 shots, and he's starting from shot number 3, which isn't a very comfortable shot to begin with. A lot of the time, that's going to force this Game Helper Opper back into playing a retake on the A bomb site, and that's exactly what you want if you're on that T side. If you're on the CT side, you're just out of luck, man. You're falling back, you're playing retake because this is a very uncomfortable situation, especially if you combine it with a CT smoke and a player dropping down and pushing up. This is almost impossible to actually hold, assuming you throw the CT smoke like a normal human that is deep enough that you can't get shot over it. It's really not a position you can necessarily hold from in any reasonable way. You're probably going to have to be falling back here. You're probably going to have to play a retake on the bomb site. And honestly, that's not the end of the world, especially when your opponents are tossing tons and tons of utility towards this A bomb site, especially if they're tossing something like a molly towards ramp, which with this type of play really should be thrown the majority of the time, as a ramp player is one of the most dangerous players to deal with this type of setup. You know, they're not going to have a ton left for afterplants, and if they don't have a ton left for afterplants, your retake shouldn't be all that bad. Again, especially as long as you can hold on to long control on the permanent basis. Now, on the B side of the map, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Obviously, nowadays, you have smokes that land towards doors, you have smokes that land towards window. Usually, the only one you really need to know is that smoke towards doors, as the window smoke is not 100% necessary in a lot of these spots, and you can also throw window mollies pretty effectively from fairly safe, something like that, which will land and blow up outside window, catching anybody here. Those things can get a lot done. But when you're looking at B plays as its T, you're looking at plays that revolve around popping out quickly with some flashes. Flashes like that bounce around and blind anybody towards the back of the bomb site here. Flashes, you know, very similarly off of the second wall that are going to land right about here, doing something just about the same. These types of flashes with players walking up and then popping out off of a door smoke are incredibly tough to deal with, and that's really the bread and butter of T sides if your long control and cat control both aren't working. But spoiler, if your long and cat control both aren't working, you're probably screwed. Generally, this is the type of thing that you'll run, you know, maybe 2 times a half, depending on how well it goes. This is especially effective when you know your opponents might be hard contesting long one round because perhaps you've been taking long control from them. So you give a change of pace, you walk your way over, toss some flashes out as you're popping out, and you take that B site control. And this is another spot where if this goes well, the round is essentially over. There's almost no way for your opponents to contend with this if you get control of the bomb site instantly. And despite the doors being flipped, that doesn't really change very much from this. You know, all it does is it makes things a bit easier in other ways. It certainly makes the mid hold a little bit more effective, but if doors are smoked off, that doesn't actually mean that much. The thing about this type of B pop is the timing, making sure that, you know, you throw that B doors smoke, but you're popping out as that's being thrown so that you're not waiting for a smoke. Your opponents see it, toss a molly down, and it's an easy hold. The way that CTs are often dealing with this now is that instead of playing, you know, the standard back sight plays, a lot of the time double stack is still extremely effective, but a lot of the time this ends up being attempted to be countered by playing closer up towards tunnels, by playing spots like top on boxes, or just general sight side plays, because if you play sight side angles, it's much harder to deal with when it comes from flashes that come over. It's easier to flash for from teammates, and you don't have to worry about wasting necessarily your all of your utility early trying to get some sort of control. One of the other things to mention when it comes to B site control as well as mid control is that mid is often a spot where people overstay their welcome. And this is a spot that can be very easily punished should someone overstay their welcome the way players often do. The reality is that once players can be peeking from top mid and lower mid, it's almost impossible to stay in this general area with an op if the Ts are doing an effective job at pushing that opper back. And trying to punish that opper can be a very rewarding task. That means this opper very often will have to fall his way back, and you'll end up looking at a double B setup. And that's why sometimes you see teams start throwing smokes like this. Smokes literally so good they crash my hard drive, thrown right like that. And what that type of smoke is going to do is it's going to really deny information from anyone that happened to be doors. If you happen to be doors at the time that was thrown, someone could be in CT. And if you're window, it's just a very uncomfortable situation. It means that you really cannot get back over here because someone could easily push through that at any moment. It takes away a lot of the information you want, a lot of the information you're looking for, and you really don't get anything out of it. The other thing that a lot of people like to do on the CT side is this boost up here on the box. This is something that used to be super common. Nowadays, a little bit less so, partially because you can kind of see them as they're up there a little bit more effectively. But now teams are actually just tossing mollies that blow up and kill that player if he's standing there. And unfortunately, those mollies are so common now in the pro scene or at high levels in competitive play that this spot is kind of just a death trap. It's really kind of just a death trap at this point. And if you are there and you get mollied out, you're screwed, right? So a lot of teams not really playing that anymore, not really playing that player deep in CT all that often anymore. They're more playing towards that, double up on B, doing their own thing, and potentially retaking mid, playing aggressive in middle is oftentimes what will really dominate a lot of opponents. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.